So what happens when the government gives you this incredible, life-changing green light only to snatch it away years later? Can you do anything about it? Well, a recent unanimous Supreme Court decision in a case called Bouarfa versus Mayorkas tackled that exact question. And let me tell you, the answer is probably not what you're expecting. It all kicks off with this moment of just pure joy. You've got Amina Bouarfa, she's a U.S. citizen, and she files a visa petition for her husband, Allah Hamayel. They have 3 kids, all U.S. citizens, and they get the news they've been waiting for. The U.S. government approves the petition. You can just imagine the relief, right? It looks like their path to finally being a family, all together in America, is clear.
But then, 2 years down the road, everything just gets turned upside down. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, sends them a letter. And in that letter, they say they found evidence that her husband was in a quote-unquote sham marriage almost a decade ago. And just like that, poof, they revoke the approval. The door that had been wide open is suddenly slammed shut.
Now, Bouarfa, she fights back. She says the evidence is wrong. But the agency, it won't budge. So she does what you think you're supposed to do. She sues. And that brings us to the absolute heart of this entire thing. After the government yanks away a life-altering decision like that, do you have a right to your day in court to fight it?
Okay, so how did a visa petition, something that happens all the time, end up at the Supreme Court? Let's walk through exactly what happened in our first section here, a promise revoked. The timeline here is pretty straightforward, but it's also kind of brutal. First, you get the approval, and there's all this hope. Then, 2 years later, that hope is just shattered by this notice of intent to revoke. The reason they give is this supposed sham marriage from a decade ago. Bouarfa even presents evidence that the person who accused him later took it back. But it doesn't matter, the agency revokes the petition anyway. So she takes them to federal court, and that is where she hits a total brick wall. The courts tell her, sorry, we can't even hear your case. We don't have the power or, in legal terms, the jurisdiction to review this.
So why not? I mean, why can't a judge just look at the evidence and decide? Well, the answer is buried in this legal tug-of-war between 2 different immigration laws that seem to say completely opposite things.
And this brings us right to the legal puzzle at the center of all this. Section 2, 2 conflicting rules. This is where things get really interesting.
The whole case really boils down to the difference between 2 tiny words, shall and may. See, on one hand, there's a law called the sham-marriage bar, and it says the government shall deny a petition if there was a sham marriage. Shall is a command. It's mandatory, no wiggle room. But on the other hand, you've got a different law that says the secretary may revoke an approval for a good reason. May sounds like a choice, right? It's discretionary. So which is it? Is it a command or is it a choice? And believe it or not, everything hangs on that one question. Was the government forced to do this or did they choose to? That's what we're tackling in Section 3, a question of discretion.
Bouarfa's lawyers, they make a really smart argument. They say, look, the second the agency thought it found a sham marriage, that mandatory shall deny rule kicked in. The government didn't have a choice. Its hands were tied. It was basically an automatic revocation. But the government argues the exact opposite. They say, no, the power to revoke always comes from that law that uses the word may. It's our choice, it's our call every single time. So why does this choice versus command thing matter so much? Well, it's because of this really powerful legal tool called jurisdiction stripping. Congress actually passed a law that says federal courts are not allowed to review agency decisions that are left in the discretion of that agency. So, if the government's action was a choice, the courts can't touch it. But if it was a mandatory duty, then Bouarfa gets her day in court. The whole case hinges on this.
This is the exact puzzle that landed right in front of the 9 justices of the Supreme Court. So let's get to it. Section 4, the court's final answer.
And the court's decision was decisive. In a 9-0 ruling, that's everybody. They sided with the government. They said that revoking a visa petition, even if it's because of a sham marriage finding, is a discretionary decision.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote the opinion for the unanimous court, and she really put it bluntly. She said, the way the law is written, that the secretary can revoke at any time for what he deems to be good and sufficient cause, that language just screams that Congress wanted the courts to defer to the agency's judgment. It is a textbook example of giving an agency discretionary power.
The court's reasoning basically came down to 3 steps. First, the text. May means choice. It's as simple as that. Second, the context backs this up. Congress gave the agency really broad power here, not a strict checklist like in other laws. And third, and this is the key part, the court said that mandatory shall deny rule
only applies when the agency is first deciding whether to approve a petition. It doesn't apply when they're deciding whether to revoke one they've already approved.
And the outcome of that logic is pretty stark. It means federal courts just don't have the power to look at the facts and decide if the government got it right. For Amina Bouarfa, the door to the courthouse is, for now, closed.
Okay, so what does this mean for the rest of us? Why should we care about this unanimous decision about one family's visa? Let's unpack that in our final section. Why this decision matters.
So what are the big takeaways here? Well, first, and this is kind of a surprising twist, the fight might not actually be over. The court itself pointed out a loophole. Bouarfa can file a brand new petition, and if that one gets denied because of the sham marriage finding, that denial can be challenged in court. Second, this is a huge reminder that Congress can basically tell the courts to stand down and let agencies do their thing. But finally, the court did point out a silver lining. Because the decision is a choice, it creates what they called room for mercy. The agency isn't forced to revoke. It could, in theory, choose not to.
So in the end, what's the real-world impact of a law like this? For Amina Bouarfa, it means the number of federal judges who can look at the evidence and decide if the government made the right call on her revoked petition is 0. Ultimately, this case isn't just about immigration. It's about this fundamental push and pull in our whole system of government. It really forces us to ask a tough question. Where do we draw the line? When should a government agency get the final say? And when is a citizen's right to their day in court a line that should never, ever be crossed?